Hey everyone, happy Tuesday. Welcome to another episode of While You're Working Live. Today's episode is super exciting. I'm talking about a topic that I feel personally passionate about, and I know a lot of you out there have had some questions about it as well. It's entrepreneurship, and I've got a really great guest on with me today to talk all things entrepreneurial. But first, I want to start off with a little bit of a story. Back when a website started that many of you use, especially if you're watching this episode right now, there was probably the greatest entrepreneurial hack of all time born. What that might be? Well, it's giving away something for free. The concept seems so natural now, but back when this particular entrepreneur was getting started, it was a new concept. He tested it out, and lo and behold, now we have Facebook. Facebook was a concept that he gave away for free. The users loved it. And here we are, billionaire way. Mark Zuckerberg had a really good entrepreneurial hack that he grew his company from. Nowadays, we have a lot of companies, tech companies, that give away their product for free to grow the user base and then sell advertising off of. It seems so smart and so simple now, but back whenever he got it started, it was a new concept. So today we're here to talk about all things entrepreneurial hacks. We have a really great guest on with us today to talk about it. His name is Jon Nastor. Please help me give him a warm welcome. Hey, Jon.
Hey, how's it going?
Jon, I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks.
Awesome. I'm so excited to have you on. Jon is the host of Hack the Entrepreneur. So hence the title of the show, Entrepreneur, all things entrepreneurship with Jon Nastor. He has interviewed the likes of Gary Vee, Seth Godin, and Pat Flynn, and many, many more. So he's going to have some really great insights to share with us today, and I cannot wait to get into it. Now, you have produced over 450 episodes of your podcast. That is an insane cadence. How do you do that? How many episodes do you produce a week?
2 episodes a week right now. We were doing 3, and in all honesty, Ashley, I meant to do 30 episodes of my show. That was the plan. And because I was running a software business at the time, and I just had some time throughout the summer, and I was like, I'm doing 30, I'm just going to do a podcast, and that's it. And then here we are, 450 episodes later.
Here we are, a mere 450 episodes later. Isn't that funny? That's just kind of how things get started. I'm sure Mark Zuckerberg was like, I'm just going to see who wants to join this at Harvard. And here he is, whoever knows how many users later. So, exactly. Yeah, I compared you to Mark Zuckerberg. So feel good about that one. Hey, it's accomplishment. Sure. And I think that, there's something to be said for somebody to take on a new project or even a new podcast and just see where it goes. So speaking of that, I want to get into our first kind of question I had for you. And that is, after producing so many shows, you probably have a different view of entrepreneurship, either from the guests that you've interviewed and kind of your experiences in growing your podcast. So you wouldn't just call an entrepreneur a teenager with a YouTube account, would you?
That depends, because some YouTubers who are even teenagers are making hundreds of thousands of dollars a month. And so when it starts to get in, it's insane, but it's absolutely true. And so I would actually say that I've actually gone more in the direction of that than I used to be, say, 10 years ago. I think it's a lot more nuanced now. And I think I used to think that it was way more black and white. There's this big gray area to the point where I strictly define entrepreneurship as the creation of something out of nothing. And no matter what that is, if that's an app, if that's a YouTube channel, if that's your blog, if that's your video interview, whatever it is, the world that we live in now, that can be turned into a business. If it's done right, and if it's done with that mindset, and even without that, it's how we create anything. It's like, that's where businesses come from, right? It's like, right. There's all the people who are like, well, I had that idea, but you didn't do anything with it because you're not an entrepreneur.
Right. That's a really good way to look at it. And I think that, nowadays there's kind of this stigma of as we talked about before, the Kim Kardashians of the world just selling Instagram posts for an I read somewhere yesterday that they make over $500,000 per Instagram post. So while that maybe doesn't look like an entrepreneur to some, it is actually the nuanced world that we live in now that you're kind of mentioning.
Exactly. And so I wouldn't have thought that. And I guess technology was also different back then. But I've also just been in it more, talked to a lot of people, and I've learned to appreciate the nuances, because some things that I'll be talking to about having a guest on, and I'll think, well, there's probably nothing to this. And then all of a sudden I hear the backstory, and it's like, I cannot believe they have this enormous business behind this tiny little thing that I see the top of. And to me, that's amazing. So I'll 100%. It's nuanced, it's gray. There's no one size fits all.
I agree with that. And I think it is always amazing to hear how people have built, something out of nothing. And I think the most amazing part to me is, and the way I define success when I talk to people, is not necessarily how much money they've made yet, but how much that they have put into it and their passion behind it, and how usually it could be stressful, but how happy they really seem when they're building something as an entrepreneur. And I always admire that about people. So speaking of entrepreneurs, I was reading a little bit about an entrepreneur that we're all familiar with. He's the man behind Tesla. And I was reading a post about him and his secret sauce. Now, entrepreneurs, I think, have a little bit of a secret sauce to them. What have you seen, or what qualities have you seen about some of the entrepreneurs you've talked to that you think drives them to be a success?
The one that I've seen the most, and actually this ties in really well to Elon Musk, especially right at this point, but it's quitting when we're done. So not when you're tired, not when you've failed, not when people are trying to remove you as CEO, but only literally when you're done, when you feel like you've built what you set out to build. And there's lots of people I talked to that the guy that was on my show yesterday, actually, he created Vivino, which is the world's largest wine community now. And
I love that app.
Yeah, and he stepped down as CEO of his company just this past March because he just said he was done. That's where he's supposed to get it to, and now he's on the board. And I mean, he still owns the company, but to me, that's it. It didn't matter what gets in your way until that point. You just you quit when you're done, and that's it. And yes, there's pivots along the way, and things come up where it's like, okay, well, that's not what it was supposed to be, and you go this direction. That's fine, but somebody telling you that you shouldn't do it, somebody telling you that you're wrong, somebody telling you that it's not going to work, somebody trying to physically remove you from it, none of that matters unless you feel that you are done with what it was you intended to do with this project.
Interesting. So you're almost saying it's being that self-aware of, your capabilities and skill set, as well as what your original goal was, and that's kind of meeting in the center. But there's still something more there, and maybe somebody else can take it to that next level with their vision.
And fierce determination and stubbornness to a certain degree. It is part of being an entrepreneur. You have to believe in whatever it is you're creating more than anybody else at first. It doesn't matter what your friends tell you, or like, that's an amazing idea, or if they tell you it's a terrible idea. It doesn't matter. You have to just stubbornly feel it within you that this is the thing that needs to be built, and you have to go out and build it no matter what gets in your way.
Yeah, I always think that is probably, you just hit the nail on the head with that quality, is that stubbornness and determination. Because you always feel like you look at some little entrepreneurs that are coming up nowadays, and you're like, how did they create all of this, and why did I not come up with this idea? And they just have that determination and blinders on almost from all the other things that could be going wrong, or things that possibly could go wrong in the future, and they just don't pay attention to it, and they just keep moving forward. And I think that is a really good quality of a successful entrepreneur. I agree. So with all the entrepreneurs that you've talked to, successful, still getting there, still reaching their goals, do you have maybe top 5 lessons that they have learned along their journey that you could share with our viewers?
Yes. So this one might oppose what I just said. But the first one is to be coachable.
Okay.
So yes, you have to be stubborn. Yes, you have to know what you're doing. But there's people, I don't care what you're creating. There's people who have been where you're trying to go. And it might not be the exact technology or whatever, but it could be scaling up your business or finding new markets, whatever it happens to be. There's always people who have been there before. You need to, most of us want to go out and try and get the help or at least ask for it, but most of us aren't coachable enough to actually accept that. Apparently that's one of the biggest criteria that defines world-class athletes from other people. It's just the ability to be coachable and just have that coachability within you. So there's that. The second one is understanding the value of sunk costs. And it seems like the people I talk to almost on a daily basis kind of come to the table with a clean slate, meaning you have to appreciate sort of, especially technology moves so fast, business moves so fast, that things change. And to be going in a direction that all the signs coming back to you are telling you that this is not working in this way, but you feel like I spent so much, or I've spent so much time or so much effort, and just keep going that it has to work. Value of sunk cost. Every day is a clean slate. If everything was starting today, would you still go in that same direction? If the answer is yes, keep going. If the answer is, well, no, I would actually take it in this direction, irregardless of anything I've already done, go in that direction.
That's really great advice. Yeah.
That one is just seems to be something that comes up. And then leveraging yourself. And this is a two-parter. So the first one is to create things that pay dividends. And so whether that's creating software that can just scale beyond you and sell over and over and over and over again without your involvement, or creating stuff like this, where we put in our work today, and then somebody can watch it now, somebody can watch it later today, tomorrow, the next day, the next year, 2 years from now, doesn't matter. It takes this half hour we spend together and leverages into the future. That's where we should be spending our time. And so you have to find the ways to leverage that. And the other one way to do that is obviously to hire other people sooner than you think you should. And be okay with them being 80% as good as you at whatever these tasks are, because you still then have 100% of your time to go do other stuff. And it's a thing that lots of us fear, is that, well, they're not as good as I am at this. Well, it's like, yeah, because you did all of that yourself. That's why it's created, but you have to be willing to let go of that and find that leverage. Then the fourth one I would say is to learn to avoid this entrepreneurial gap that I've been thinking about for 500 interviews now, which is that we usually are living or projecting our own successes personally and in business into the future, meaning no matter what it is that we accomplish within our businesses or in our lives, we always don't see ourselves as successful because we always are looking at the next thing. In 3 months, when I sell that much, in 6 months, when I get to be on that podcast, that's when I'll be a success. And then you just said bigger things, and you're always just, doesn't matter what you accomplish. And the same as with Elon Musk. I mean, most of us look at him and just idolize him, and he's just not where he wants to be. He wants to be somewhere else. And that blows our mind. And everybody's like that. I don't care what scale you're at. And so it's really sort of learning to appreciate, at least once in a while, what you have accomplished, what you've learned, what you haven't learned, and then go from there. And that really, I think, helps us sort of find peace within what it is we're creating. And then the last one is going to be one that somebody told me after I made one of the most expensive mistakes of my life, which is to sprint across the finish line. And this mostly goes for sales and for negotiations and contracts. Writing a contract with another company, a partnership or something, or selling a company, you go through this giant long negotiation, and it just takes months sometimes, and then all of a sudden you come to terms, and then most of us want to celebrate then before the contract has actually been signed and the money's been put in the bank. And this is something where there's gifts out there, there's videos of people running just marathons and stopping 15 feet before the end and yes, I won. And then somebody comes up behind them and beats them, and it's like, oh.
You're so I've learned.
that don't celebrate before you've crossed the finish line. Don't even try and run to the finish line. Always be thinking 10 feet past. That's where you can stop. That's where you can celebrate. So next time you're making a sale or closing a deal, sprint across the finish line as fast as you can, and then you won't have to learn this the hard way like I did.
I think I could feel the pain behind that one. And so I think that is very good advice. And, thank you for sharing that lesson for others to take on. Those are really great. And I really like the sprint across the finish line, because too often you get so excited. You finally gone through all those negotiations and you have the contract, but you don't have that signature on the dotted line yet. And then
none of it matters. None of it matters.
That is so true.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of sprinting across the finish line, many of the amazing companies we know and love nowadays, I'm sure, learned some of these lessons along their journey. So this question is just for fun. If you could go back in time, what company, if any, would you create yourself, and what would you do differently?
Okay, this is going to show my Canadianness, but I would go back and I would create Blackberry again, which sounds ridiculous to say in 2018. But from where I'm from, Toronto, they've done amazing things with the bits of money they did make. And what I would do differently is I would obviously accept the way technology was going, or the way technology needed to go, which is to accept that people didn't want buttons on their phones anymore, and that they actually wanted to be able to touch the screen and do stuff with it. It's obviously one of the greatest mistakes ever in the history of tech, I would say. And I mean, the guys who created that company, they've lost almost everything, but they've still, in those times, they've spent like hundreds of millions of dollars just donating money and building amazing things around here, building research facilities for cancer and such, and just like crazy things and like so little money compared to what like people at Apple have made, and really haven't done, to me, a lot of good with, except for create cool technology, which is obviously awesome, but it doesn't really help beyond that. It just makes cool tech. So if I could, just because I feel so damn bad for those guys sometimes, and so I would go back and create Blackberry, as embarrassing as that sounds, because it is kind of a laughingstock in a lot of ways. But I would do that, and then just at that fork in the road, I would go all in on touch screens. You would have made that. I think that was your lesson number maybe 3 or 4A, as being able to pivot with the things that you learned. Yeah, sunk costs. It would have been like, because they were just all in. It's all buttons. It's all buttons. It's like it did well for you.
Buttons.
Exactly. Buttons were great. They got you here, but now go somewhere else. But
like, no, everybody's gonna love a button. That Apple iPhone still has a button.
Exactly.
So our last question for the day is, what are some of the greatest hacks that you have seen, or you think are out there or have existed in some of the either companies we are all know and love, or maybe we're not even familiar with yet, but are soon to come from things that you've learned on your interviews?
One from hundreds and hundreds of interviews ago, and I didn't actually know who she was at the time, but her name was Andrea Lake. She's the founder of Sticker Junkie, which is a huge sticker company online. And I didn't know that at the time, but she said something to me that has really stuck with me, which was with getting over sort of the fear of launching things and putting things out into the world, which was always think the day before launch that it'll never be worse than today. And to me, that was really profound. It's like you don't, and then it goes on like, there's the famous startup guy who says, like, if you look back on version 1 of your product a year later or 2 years later and aren't embarrassed by it, then you launched too late. And that's easy to say looking back, but to me, it's that fear that maybe we should put off launch because it's not ready. It's not ready. It's terrible right now. It's like, right, but it'll never be worse than today. Even the day after tomorrow, you can improve that headline, or you can change the color schemes, or you can add something to your product or your podcast. and just know that it's never going to be worse than today. And today it's good enough just to put out into the world. To me, that's profound because, I mean, over a decade into just launching products, putting things out, it still does keep me up at night the night before launch. But I always try and just remember Andrea saying that to me. It'll never be worse than today.
I think that's really great advice that our viewers can take with them. We always talk around here to clients and just to ourselves. And I'm not sure if anybody can see me. Hopefully you guys can still hear me out there. Sorry, my screen is black for some reason. But I will leave everybody with this final thought is that perfection is typically the enemy of progress. So I think that goes along with what Jon, you were saying, is just go with it and know that you have the luxury of making iterations of your own product and your own technology, and always remember to sprint across the finish line.
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today on the show. It was a pleasure speaking with you, and I know that our viewers got some really great tips and tricks to take into their everyday, either corporate life or something that they are trying to launch or have been working on for years. I think this is really great advice, and I appreciate you coming on with us. Everybody needs to go check out Jon's podcast, Hack the Entrepreneur. He also has some amazing downloadable courses that you can check out too over on roadmaptofreedom.co. And if you are looking for all of these resources, we will have them over on our blog under the additional resources underneath the full length video. And we will see everybody next week. Bye-bye.
Thanks for having me.